shiny authors website.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. Mike, you brought up briefly during your talk, and I agree that the National Film Board of Canada, that funding. So what can Australian funders do? How can they change the ways in which they think about stories and this idea of multi-platform to really start encouraging and nurturing innovation and excellence in the same way that happened in Canada a few years ago?
Look, it's a tough question because I think invariably it's not one answer. It's always multi-pronged, and it's always a balance, because I think on one hand, I think there could be a lot more commercial rigor in the way we fund and drive projects. Really asking hard questions about, does this project have an audience? Have they identified their audience? Particularly if it's in an online space where attracting that audience is so key, and understanding that audience is much more than just a demographic or an age bracket is really important. So I think having a greater commercial discipline and forcing creators to think through those challenges will result in works that have much further reach and much further engagement. But there's a flip side to that, which is really about innovation, because you look at some of the work that the National Film Board did with investing a lot in interactive projects. They were exciting and vibrant and challenging and interesting. The audiences for them were very small. And they didn't matter, because guaranteed all the people who worked on those projects learned enormous things, made mistakes, didn't necessarily find an audience, but I can't wait to see what they do over the next 10 years. I think the whole industry worldwide will go, in the next 10 years we're going to look back at that period, particularly in Canada, as a little hothouse. So I think that's the balance. I would like to see a bit of both. I think it's been a smart move for some of the screen funding agencies to move towards what they kind of call an enterprise model. So instead of the people in the funding agency making these choices, you fund smaller companies to grow, to bring more people on, and to allow them to be to be less risk adverse. I think that's a smart move. But at the same time, I think we have to be able to cordon off the experiment. We have to be able to put the funds into something that doesn't have KPIs, to use that term, that demand that it's necessarily highly successful in terms of audience or revenue. But we take a long-term approach and go, these guys may fall flat on their face, but they are going to learn so much, and what they do 10 years from now is going to blow our socks off. And I think only when we've got that balance, we'll be in the right place. I think unfortunately we're kind of in the middle. We're not putting enough emphasis on audience engagement, nor are we putting enough into kind of free-form experimentation to make the discoveries we need to make. And I would love to see a kind of a clarity about that.
Great. The other question is, what's coming up in the near future that you're excited about and you think really starts to herald some significant shifts in the ways in which people are creating multi-platform stories and thinking about stories across platforms?
I think there are two things that I'm particularly excited about that have started to happen just in the last couple of years. The obvious one that's staring everyone in the face is VR, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for VR. I'm not necessarily in the camp that's going, great, this is going to be the next big cinema and it's going to have billions of audiences worldwide. Remains to be seen. But I think the impact of VR, regardless of the scale of the audience it takes up, will be profound, because the experience I've had working on some VR projects lately is that this combination of skill sets you have to put into making a VR project, which draw from architecture and stage and magic, performance magic and oral traditions and gaming, and not to mention cinema and other forms, is such an interesting hybrid that practitioners who get involved with VR are going to make great other works in other mediums as well, because they're going to learn all sorts of things about immersion, experience, role for the audience to play. It changes the language and the grammar a little bit. So to me, it's not necessarily I'm excited about VR because VR is going to be the next big thing. I'm excited about what questions VR causes us to ask as writers and creators in terms of our process. I think that's really exciting, regardless of how big the VR audience is in the end. The other thing that I think is also really important is the normalization of cross-platform. For a long time it's been the other. So you'd have my television show, my feature film here, my book, and there'd be this other stuff. And I think we're finally getting past treating it as sort of the second son. What we're seeing is a greater normalization. I'm seeing a lot more television shows that from the beginning, with the showrunner, from the beginning of the creative process, are bringing the multi-platform into the room and treating it as one project with multiple outcomes, rather than a primary project and a secondary project. And I think the more we do that, two really important things happen. We will make better works for starters, because too much multi-platform has been an afterthought and not front and center to the story development. But the other major benefit that come from is greater opportunities for new writers. Because when we take television, for example, when we're making series that are only 6 and 8 episodes, instead of what we used to make, which were 22 and 45 episode series, there is very little room for new writers to get in that space and get those early credits or get involved. It becomes a very, very closed shop because the stakes are high and the amount of money is high. But we broaden that out. We have more multi-platform that's integral to those central productions, particularly in television and film. Then we create opportunity for all sorts of new writers to get into that space and grow their experience. And I think that's healthy for the industry, for creative practitioners, and provides a real light at the end of the tunnel for writers who want to write big things.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks. Thanks very much. It's good.
My tongue